everyone, welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith, and in this video we're going to focus on how to play the Isofarian Guard from Sky Kingdom Games. If you haven't checked out my solo playthrough of the prototype, you're going to want to click on the eye in the top right hand corner of this video. You'll be able to go there and watch that playthrough, which will fill in some of the gaps in terms of gameplay. In this video, we're going to focus on the overview of the rounds and some of the things that weren't covered in that solo playthrough. So without further ado, let's move right into the exploration phase. In this phase, players are going to move their character, which is represented by a miniature, along the nodes represented on the map, which look like little ovals, and those ovals are points of interest on the map. You'll also note that your miniature in most cases has two characters on it. That is because allies are a part of this game. In addition to the oval nodes that you're going to run into on the game map, you're also going to find scroll locations on the map, which represent larger areas, cities that you can explore, and these areas are going to have a mini map inside the box, which is then going to take you to a second level of detail, allowing you to find additional nodes within that particular location. So as you can see here, our miniature has landed in Silney, and the Silney mini-map is essentially another level of detail within the city that we now have access to. And inside of Silney, there are also oval nodes that we can go and explore, and the actual rulebook itself will specify whether all of these nodes are available to you or only specific ones based on the narrative. As you journey across the world of Isofar with your miniature, moving node by node, all of these nodes, as I mentioned, are points of interest. So every time you move into one on the major world map, you're going to be going to the scenario bag and drawing one of these 6 chips at random. You won't know which one you're going to get, and then you'll be referencing the number you pull into the rulebook to determine what happens. This could be something as simple as dealing with wildlife in the area, or it could be as complex as opening up a completely branching side quest. Inside the rulebook, you're going to find all of the Isofar node events from the main world map referenced in here. So every time you move into a brand new node on the world map, if it happens to be like this one, the Sears Path, you'll reference the area down below. 1 through 6 will correlate to the 6 different scenario chips that are in the draw bag. You'll draw one at random and encounter or deal with that particular event. Also, it's important to note that what you're seeing here in front of you is in prototype form. It may appear that there's only one side quest here and one side quest over here, but in the very final version of the game, every single node will have at least one side quest, if not more. An important thing to note is when your miniature moves into one of the larger scroll locations on the world map and has access to a mini map, these nodes that you can move between on the mini map do not force you to draw a scenario chip from the bag like you normally would if you were exploring on the world map. This is very important as the narrative itself is going to drive the options available to you when you land in these scroll locations. So for instance, when you move into a city, there might be the availability of a blacksmith in the slums, which the narrative will drive as an option. Or you might have a narrative event based on your main storyline or some side quest at the King's Keep. Or maybe the inn is open and you're able to go there to save your game and restore your life. Let's move into the second major phase of the game, that is combat. But first, we're going to talk about the character board here in front of us so we understand the ins and outs of how this works. Essentially, on your character board, you will see a couple icons represented in the top left-hand corner. This is your starting base attack 3, base defense at 2, and action points at 2. So for a base attack of 3, you're going to be grabbing 3 of these chips, and these are going to be dropped inside of your character's draw bag. Same with the defense here of 2 are represented by shields. These will also be added into the bag. Down below we have the action points, or AP points as they're referred to in the game, and these are represented by 2 cubes that sit in the available area on the far right hand side of the board. As they're used, they get exhausted, and as they're refreshed round on round of combat, they come back up to be reused again. There are mechanics in the gameplay that may stop that from happening, meaning less choice during the next upcoming combat round. Right here we have this satchel. This satchel can hold Lux Essence as well as a number of different enemy drops and loot that you may find on your journey. Over here we have 2 different slots. These are for trinkets, accessories, and other items, and you'll line these up and equip them to get particular bonuses as you journey. Also above, you've got a weapon slot and an armor slot. Both of these currently have 2 items inside of it. One is a guard's sword and shield. One is a guard's tunic. In the top left-hand corner, we've got stars for rarity. The more stars, the more rare the item is. But what's even more important than the rarity is the stat bonuses that you actually get for chips. And you can see here the guard's sword and shield gives you an additional sword as well as an additional shield to your draw bag. Having the guard's tunic gives you an additional shield. So going into things from the start of combat at the beginning of a brand new game, in this example, you'd be going in with 4 swords and 4 shields, but there's also another element to combat that matters, and that's character progression. Throughout the game, as you take down enemies and move through the narrative, you are going to acquire what is called Lux Essence, and they're represented by these chips, and they will sit in your satchel until you accumulate 5 of them. So once you get to 5 or higher, you can then trade in a number of Lux Essence, so in this case 6, leaving me with 1 in the satchel, in order to go to your character progression board and bump yourself up, or essentially level up. This is Gregory's skill tree, and as you can see, it's already marked in the first spot, meaning we already get this from the beginning of the game. That's right, the very first one is always unlocked. In this case, it's going to give us an additional sword chip that goes into our draw bag. So that is going to have us sitting at 5 sword chips or attack chips in the bag, and 4 shield chips or 4 defense in the bag. So now that we know the very first spot on the skill tree is automatically given to us and we've added it to our chip bag, we're going to move up for the 5 Lux that we've already spent from our satchel, and that's going to unlock Roman numeral number 1. There are unlocks, as I mentioned, through the Roman numerals, and what's really interesting about this is it actually gives you opportunity to use very, very powerful abilities called speaking stones on your character, and these are depicted by these 4 cards right here in front of you. For Gregory, he's got his abilities listed down below, and each of these has a crystal which will sit on a different board we'll see later that is exhausted on the turn you want to use the ability, where it then cools down for a turn and then is available again to be used on the turn after. So it's a little bit different and a little bit longer of a wait than a typical refresh of AP, which is your action points. So for every character in the game, there is going to be 4 available speaking stones on each Roman numeral unlock up the skill tree. But remember, inside the world of Isofar, there are also opportunities to find speaking stones as well. As your journey continues and you progress further up the skill tree, one thing to be aware of is the fact that Lux Essence will increase in the amount required in order to unlock the next level. So for instance, we talked about this first space being free, this one is 5, and they'll continue to increment upwards as you unlock more and more along your journey. You can see that the next time that we spend Lux Essence in order to unlock the next point on the skill tree, we have a fork in the road and have to make a decision between the red sword here and the red shield over here. The major difference between the black chip and the red chip is the black chip counts as 1 when paying towards player abilities that have to do with attacking, whereas the red chip counts as 2 when using player abilities, and we'll see this later on. So in this example, I'm going to go ahead and choose to take the sword. This would be added to my character's draw bag. Later on, you can see other options open up, like actually increasing your base stats for defense or attack, potentially getting additional action points permanently, or going up into this area where you have to make a choice left or right, and then take the corresponding upgrades in order. This is the enemy dashboard, and you're going to see this when you run into enemies on your journey, when pulling enemies either through some narrative event or through a node scenario chip pull available. So in this particular case, we have a Falmond Scout here, and this particular character starts with a base attack of 2, defense of 2, 1 action point, which we put down here in its available area, 5 health, so we're going to go ahead and set the health marker to 5. This AI is comprised of 8 cards, and inside of this deck you have 3 pairs of 2 cards that are the exact same, and then you have 2 cards that are considered special cards. As combat turns go on and on, each AI card will be flipped from the AI area into the AI discard. Here the AI card will be referenced and followed as written. And these are the last boards that relate to combat. These are the character ability boards. That's right, these are character specific for Gregory, and they have 6 slots of which to be filled with different abilities Gregory has from the start of the game and what he gains during his journey. So you can see here he's got 4 basic cards that he starts with: Critical Strike, Guard, Cross Strike, and Take Cover, with different levels of rarity. But what's more important is what's down at the very bottom of the card. You can see here you can slot a chip into this particular card when you draw it during your turn in combat to activate that ability, then giving you whatever that additional bonus is going to be on top of your base stat, as well as any items and things you have equipped. So that becomes your final number for attack value. You'll also see how much AP that particular ability costs to do it or to activate it, and you have to make sure you have that AP available. You'll remember that we unlocked the Speaking Stone when we hit Roman numeral number 1 on the character's progression tree, and when we did so, the Speaking Stone slots into one of the available slots down here. There's 6 of them, and then there's the exhausted slots to the right. When a Speaking Stone is used, it's going to move to the exhausted slot. It will sit there for the next turn, and then the turn following that, it will be reactivated and available for use. So every other turn, you'll be able to use a Speaking Stone. So now that we've covered the player boards, the enemy boards, and the ability boards, all of these are used during combat. And we're going to go through an example combat right now, but let's first talk about a couple things on Gregory's board that's different. First off, he's no longer at 20 health, he's down to 12 health. The other thing that's different is he's holding a health potion that heals 5, and he definitely plans on using that when we move into that combat turn. The other thing to note is that we have the Falmond Scout up here, and it's a level 2. We'll be zooming in on that later on so you can see the stats for that particular card as well. It's also worth noting that all of the chip upgrades that I've gotten throughout this video to this point are going to be inside of Gregory's draw bag. So for instance, we unlocked the red attack chip. That is going to be part of his draw bag. When you begin combat, the heroes always go first. If you're playing solo, you go first. If you're playing cooperatively, you get to choose strategically which of the characters controlled are going first. But all the heroes will go, and then the enemies will follow suit afterwards. You'll then draw chips out of your bag equal to your AP that's in the available section, 1 at a time. So I'm going to go into the draw bag right now and pull out 2 chips. The first chip that I got is a shield for defense. The second chip that I got is the red chip for attack. At this stage in combat, I have a few options here. Now, first off, I mentioned earlier on that I wanted to heal myself, so at any time I can choose during my turn to spend the potion that I have on me to gain 5 health. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to spend this health potion to heal 5, and it's removed. So I'm going to go up from 12 to 17. Now I have choices in regards to the abilities I want to actually activate over here. And I'm kind of looking at Critical Strike because I know this is actually worth 2 swords, and that would allow me to activate this Critical Strike, as there's numbers underneath each of these cards representing how many of each you need to have to activate them chips wise. So I do have the available chips to do this, but it's not just the cost of the chips to activate the ability, it's also about the AP. You have to be able to spend that as well. So I do have 2 AP, so I could go ahead and spend the 2 AP as well. Now I fully have resolved this Critical Strike, and now I can go ahead and make that attack against the enemy on my turn here. So I have 3 as a base, plus 2 is 5. The Falmon Scout has a defense, though, of 3, so that's going to take 3 away from my 5, leaving with only 2 getting through, so I'll drop his health from 5 down to 3. Now, as you can see here, I have no more AP to spend, so unless I have a character ability card that allows me to activate it with a chip that doesn't require any action points, then this really would be the end. But I do have one other thing, and it's called a Speaking Stone. This says cross/. The Speaking Stone is sitting in the available area, and when I go ahead and choose to use this by exhausting it, moving it over here, I gain this ability below, and it says attack all enemies, which is pretty awesome if I was fighting multiple enemies. In this case, I'm just fighting 1, which is still good because it will beef up my basic stat of 3 up to a 4. And then when you take into account the 3 defense from the Scout, 1 additional hit gets through. So it certainly doesn't kill him, but it does get him closer to death. At this point, I have nothing else that I'd like to do during my turn, so I'm going to choose to end my hero's turn. And when I do this, we go ahead and refresh my character's AP back to the available area. Also, my Speaking Stone, which was just exhausted in this current round, will not be available for me to use again in the next round, but it will be available in the round after that. It's important to note that when you have a Speaking Stone available to use, you don't have to use it. You can strategically keep it to use at the most opportune time. Now the enemy turn begins, and we have a Scout here to deal with. The stats for this Scout are 3 for a base attack, 3 defense, as we're well aware of now, 2 action points to start with this enemy, and then we have 5 health, and we know we've already hit this Scout down to 2. It's important to note that on Gregory's prior turn, if he had have actually killed the Scout wouldn't even activate right now. So let's go ahead and activate this character by drawing 1 AI card. We'll also note down here the 2 AP is in the slot here to start for this character. And again, that's all they have access to unless their AI deck changes that. So the very first card off the top is an action which states focus, gain 2 AP. So that literally states that they gain 2 additional action points right now, which is pretty crazy because that is going to open the doors up for them to use a lot of AP against us, activating a lot of potential damage towards us or abilities and powers that they have. Continuing on through the list, it says if any target healed last turn, draw 1 card. Last turn, the person that took the last turn was Gregory, and he did heal by drinking a potion for 5 health. So because of that, this is a situation where we would have to draw an additional AI card. This is not the norm. Usually when you activate an enemy, it's just 1 card. But if you actually trigger another card draw, you have to do it. So we're going to draw a second card. This one says choose a target. We only have 1, so it's fairly easy. And the next thing says attack target, arrow volley. We're going to be spending 1 AP from the Falmon Scout. It's going to make an attack at 2, which gets added on to its base of 3 for a total of 5. So with that total of 5, we now look to see how much defense Gregory has. Well, I have a base of 2, but I didn't activate any defensive abilities that I had, like take cover or guard, which would have ramped up my defense. So I only have 2, taking away from its 5 attack, which hits me for 3, dropping me from 17 down to 14. The next step of the AI card says, if the attack deals damage greater than the defense of Gregory in this case, draw another card. So you can see how this stuff can start to trigger multiple draws within the same round, which is pretty vicious. So we're going to go ahead here and draw another card. This one states, again, choosing the target is quite easy because I know it's always going to be Gregory when playing solo, but there is a way there to distinguish against multiple characters or heroes. The next step down says attack target, critical shot, spend 2 AP and do an attack of 3. So 2 AP is going to move over to this side. It's going to be attack of 3 plus the base 3, and we know Gregory's defense is just 2. So Gregory's taking 4 HP hit this time. Gregory is really feeling it as he drops from 14 down to 10. Next up, we have an arrow volley where 1 AP is spent, and yep, the scout still has AP to spend, so it's going to do it. And it's going to be attack of 2 plus the 3, which is a total of 5 against my 2 defense, which is going to be another hit of 3. So that's going to drop Gregory from 10 down to 7. And at this point, the next thing that states is to end the turn. So here is where we would stop. But this is a great example, again, of how multiple things can happen and trigger and really cause some pretty nasty damage. And also realize the fact that these characters in this game can ramp up the amount of AP that they have available to them, allowing them to do some pretty nasty combos. With 8 cards inside the AI deck, card counting actually does become an interesting strategy point in the game. And now we come to the end of the combat round example. So the last thing you do at the end of a round is you'll take all your chips off your abilities and just place them off to the side. They do not go back inside the draw bag. Your Speaking Stone, if it was exhausted during this turn, is going to sit and be fully exhausted again during another full round before it's then allowed to be readied back up for that third round. It's also important to note that there is strategy behind replenishing your bag. On your character's turn, you can decide to spend 1 HP during your turn in order to put all of the chips that are out of play, currently not in your draw bag, back into your draw bag. And there is strategy involved with this, especially in situations where your draw bag begins to fill with a bunch of negative conditions and you don't want to see those come up. Maybe taking 1 HP and bringing a bunch of regular chips back into the bag gives you better odds, because at the end of a battle, all of the negative condition or effect chips come out of your bag. So there is strategy involved with when you should do something like that. The only other way that that works is if your draw bag is completely empty, then you're able to replenish it. So that is going to end the combat example. One thing to note is that if this Falmond Scout had have been killed off, you'd go ahead and flip this card over on the back side and use your scenario chips to draw a chip to determine what kind of enemy loot drops. If you happen to pick a 6 out of the bag at random, it's your choice as to which loot you'd like. For those that were interested in seeing the different types of chips that are included, at least in this prototype rulebook, again, all of these chips are subject to change in terms of how they work, or even the ones that will be included during the Kickstarter or afterwards. But here's a good example of some of the chips that you don't see during this video or even in the playthrough that I did of the prototype. You'll also run into green chips within this game, and green chips are temporary bonuses that are added mid-battle and are removed from a character's bag once they are drawn, meaning they're not going to be shuffled back into the bag once it's empty. They also do not count against your chip draw count on the character's turn. Normally you draw these chips up to your AP value, so green chips can allow you to draw additional chips each turn. Not only do they allow you to power more abilities, but they act as a mitigating tool for your draws. If your character is ever defeated in battle, they start back at the last inn they stayed at, indicated by the campfire chip you can see right here. So this is the Raven's Beak Inn. So if my character happened to die out in the world map, I would actually be brought back to Raven's Beak Inn. In addition, if characters are defeated in battle, their satchel contents are dropped on the node they are located at. And to reacquire the contents, the characters must reach that location again. And if the character is defeated before they reach it again, the contents are permanently lost. There are also chests inside of cities where players can also store their contents of their satchels. All items in these chests are safe from being lost. Narrative events are triggered when the character's miniature lands on top of a narrative chip, which is the book icon. So the second that one of my characters lands on a narrative chip, then I can interact with this chip by either following the rulebook, the Foreteller app, or both. The Foreteller app is actually optional though. And that's going to conclude the how to play video for the Isofarian Guard. I really hope that this helps you make an informed decision on the game. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, keep on rolling solo.